Okay, so today we're going to be talking about mechanisms of evolution. It's the next section of notes in your note packet. Make sure that you are writing down specific examples of all of these, so when you take your test, when it's open note, you have some examples to help clarify some of these concepts. Okay, so macroevolution. The word macro means large. So this is large-scale evolution. So this is going to happen over a long period of time. So this is very large changes in species that occur over a very long period of time. And you should be able to pause this at any point throughout these notes, since you're watching on YouTube here. So just pause it, make sure you get it written down, and don't worry about going too fast. We're also going to be talking about extinction of all of the species that have ever lived on this planet. So think about the dinosaurs, all of those organisms that have ever walked the earth. 99% of them are now extinct. So only 1% of the organisms that have ever lived on this planet are still alive today. And we've looked into the past, and over time, we've seen that there are periods where large amount of species go extinct all at once, and this is called a mass extinction. So paleontologists, these are people that study the extreme past. So these are the people that dig up the dinosaur bones or look at fossils. They think that these mass extinctions could have happened for a number of different reasons. Going to talk about what maybe killed off the dinosaurs. Right now, the accepted explanation for the extinction of the dinosaurs is that a very large asteroid struck the Earth, and because of that, it changed the entire atmosphere. So these organisms could have basically run out of oxygen or other gases that they needed to breathe and survive. It could have completely wiped out food sources, water sources, made the Earth too hot. So a number of different things could have been caused by a very large asteroid striking the Earth. So what effects have mass extinctions had on the history of life? So mass extinctions have led to the disappearance of so many different species that the habitats that those species used to live in were now open and available for other organisms to start living in those areas. And so that allowed some of those other organisms that weren't killed off during those mass extinctions to survive and thrive and then evolve. When mass extinctions occur, because of those habitats being opened up, new species could form. So there's this burst of evolution that would always happen after mass extinctions, and some of the evidence that we have for that is looking at fossils. When the dinosaurs became extinct, that kind of opened up the door for small mammals, like they were usually really small, like a mouse or a rat. They became much larger, so think of like an elephant or even humans, and birds to evolve and become the more dominant type of organisms on the planet. So one of the first things that we're going to talk about as a mechanism of evolution is something called adaptive radiation. And according to textbooks' definitions of this is the process by which a single species or a small group of species evolves into several different forms that live in different ways. So try to think of an example where it's a species of organism that has now evolved into lots of different species that live in slightly different ways. Something that comes to mind for me here is birds. We don't have things like toucans living in Ohio. They are adapted to living in tropical rainforests. We also don't have emperor penguins living in Ohio. They're adapted to live in colder, more frigid temperatures like Antarctica. But they are all birds. Another example that would make more sense to you is Darwin's finches. If you remember, those are the birds that had all different shaped beaks that were adapted to the food sources that they had available to them. And that was because they lived in different areas. So adaptive radiation can happen on very large scales as well. Like when the dinosaurs became extinct, the variety of small mammals that were around were able to evolve, and mammals then adapted to their environment, and now we have numerous species of mammals, including things like elephants that live in Asia or Africa, big cats like lions, humans. Name a mammal and they've all sort of descended from a common ancestor, like when the dinosaurs were around. So when the dinosaurs were on the earth, though, you gotta keep in mind that mammals were also very small and very few. So when the dinosaurs died off, that left a very large habitat available for those mammals to evolve and kind of take over and become the dominant type of organism on the planet. So convergent evolution is a type of adaptive radiation, and this is when unrelated organisms look like each other. So they look similar, but they're not related to one another. So you might want to jot that down as a little easier of a definition. So it's when two organisms are not related to each other, but could look similar. So you might be thinking, like, what can I come up with as an example for this? We will talk about that in just a moment. So convergent evolution, when I think of things that converge, that means to come together. Like when you've learned about plate tectonics, convergent plate boundaries means that it was two plates moving towards one another. So because these two organisms converge in their evolution, meaning that they share a evolutionary development, they have a characteristic or characteristics that they share, they came together in their evolution, but they are still unrelated. So convergent evolution has given us things like sharks and dolphins, seals, penguins. We're going to look at how those two things are look similar but are unrelated. So for instance, here on your left, you have the tail fin of a dolphin. This is called a fluke. The tail fin of a dolphin is called a fluke. F-L-U-K-E. Dolphins are mammals. Okay, they give live birth, they produce milk, they are warm-blooded. Okay, so dolphins are mammals, but take a look on the right. That is called a yellowfin, or a yellowfish, sorry. If you look at its tail fin, it looks pretty similar, but this is in fact a fish. They are cold-blooded, they lay eggs, they are not mammals. So the dolphin and the fish are not related, but they do live in similar habitats. They both live in the water, and they both swim, so that makes sense that they would both have a tail. So an example of convergent evolution is the fact that dolphins and fish are both have tails, but one is a mammal and one is a fish. So this would be called analogous structures. So they're analogous because they don't share a common ancestor, but they still somehow ended up with the same type of structures. Coevolution, if you cooperate or someone is your coworker, that means you work with them or together with them. So coevolution is when two species evolve. One species evolves and the other species that somehow interacts with them has to evolve to keep up with them. So two species evolve in response to changes in each other over time. So this is called coevolution. They're evolving together. All right, so an example that I have here is this plant on your left is a type of orchid, and the large node towards the back of the orchid is kind of in the center of your screen. That's where the nectar is stored for this orchid, okay? And on the right, you have a picture of a moth, and that long stringy tube that you see out of its mouth it acts like a straw, and it's called a proboscis, and usually it's kind of coiled up in front of its mouth, and then when it goes to feed on something it uncoils it and uses it as a straw. So this is an example of coevolution, and what you have to ask yourself is, which one evolved first? Do you think the orchid evolved and then the moth had to evolve, or do you think it was the moth evolved and then the orchid evolved? So what has happened is that the orchid evolved in order to basically try to keep its nectar away from the moth. So it evolved to have that node all the way back in that flower, and then the moth couldn't reach it. So over time, the moth had to evolve in order to reach that nectar, so it has that long proboscis, that long sucking straw structure. So this is an example of coevolution because the orchid evolved and the moth had to evolve in response to the orchid. So some plants have evolved to be poisonous to prevent insects from feeding on them, and these are examples of coevolution as well. For example, on the left-hand side, you have a giant pitcher plant. Organisms will try to get its nectar, but what happens is the inner walls of the pitcher plant are slippery, and in the bottom of that pitcher plant, this plant has a pool of digestive enzymes that are also a part of its nectar. So it actually draws in insects and feeds on them. So this is a type of carnivorous plant. Oleander on the right here is actually toxic to anything that can eat it, and it actually can be deadly to even humans. So that's one of its defensive mechanisms against other organisms trying to eat it as well. So Darwin felt that changes, evolutionary changes, would be slow and steady. And if something is slow and steady, that means it changes over time gradually. So he called this gradualism. Gradualism is the slow and steady evolution of an organism. Rapid evolution can be caused if small populations become isolated. So if we took a group of students and stuck them on an island, those humans would have to evolve quickly to adapt to that island environment. But remember, it wouldn't happen in their lifetime. It would happen over the course of hundreds or thousands of years if they survived that long. This would, rapid evolution also happens in small groups that migrate to new environments. So again, same idea there. Back to small populations becoming isolated, this would be like, the movie comes to mind, Happy Feet 2, when the iceberg trapped the penguins on the interior of Antarctica. if that would be a form of geographic isolation that those penguins would have to adapt. So maybe they would learn to fly and be able to fly over the ice in order to reach food, or they would just all die. Some groups evolve rapidly because of mass extinctions, again, leaving those habitats available for other small organisms to evolve very quickly. Punctuated equilibrium, on your last test, you kind of saw something similar to this. Punctuated means like using a period, right? So an equilibrium is things being the same. So if punctuated equilibrium would mean periods of things staying the same that end. So this is a pattern of evolution that there's long periods of time where organisms remain unchanged. They stay the same for a very long period of time, and then punctuated meaning it comes to an end, and there would be a very short period of very rapid change. So long period of things staying the same, and then a short period of rapid evolution. So if you take a look at your picture on the right here with the ancient horses and the modern horses, working your way up from the bottom, you can see how that horse stayed the same, that horse-like organism stayed the same for a very long period of time and then rapidly changed. And then the space from rapidly changed upward is longer, and then it rapidly changed again, and so on and so forth. So a reason that could cause that rapid change that we've been discussing throughout this entire section of notes is a mass extinction. So if that very small horse-like organism at the bottom of that image, there was a mass extinction, that organism might have new food sources available to it now and have to evolve. So that would account for the short period of rapid evolution then. And then maybe it was content and they were happy and surviving and reproducing and all those things. And then maybe there was another mass extinction with new habitats and new food sources and new types of environments that they had to adapt to. So that would also account for those points of rapid evolution. So again, punctuated equilibrium is long periods of no change, followed by very short, rapid periods of evolution. The last section for this piece of notes is about genes and body plans. So in everyone's DNA, you have something called master control genes or Hox genes. These are genes that control major developmental pieces and parts of bodies. And these are typically structures that if an organism is born without them, they either won't survive or they might not even be born in the first place. So these are master genes that are in control of major body structures. So this would be like in our DNA, genes controlling us developing a 4-chambered heart. So if you were born with less than 4 chambers, your heart might not be as efficient, or you might need a transplant or things of that nature. For example, in types of insects, one of the Hox genes controls the development of wings. So if you look at the ancient insect on the left, there it has numerous pairs of wings on many parts of its body, on many body segments there. But over time, if those Hox genes evolve or become changed or mutated, we have now modern insects that have 1 pair of wings on one body segment, and we have some modern insects that actually have 2 pairs of wings on 2 different body segments. So this is just showing you that DNA over time can change, and this is how organisms, just as simple as an insect, today would look vastly different than the ancient ones. Okay, so I believe that is the end of your notes, a whopping 19 minutes. So just make sure you have these done for the next class period, as we will not be reviewing these sections during class. So we should be all set, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.